Welcome to another episode of Each Bring a Poem. Today, I'm really excited to have as my guest Richard Blanco. And Richard is one of my former professors. He's a titan of poetry that I like to say. Um, and sometimes, maybe when he's had a couple margaritas, he says that we're friends. I like to say we're friendly because I don't know how you can be friends with a Titan. So, welcome, Richard.
Hi. I love this whole concept, actually. Love it. Good for you
All
doing
right,
this.
so I'm going to read your bio now, which we could pare down considerably,
Yeah.
or we'd be here all day. That would be like a great exercise, just to read somebody's like Titanic bio and just keep going and like have them read for 5 minutes. I kind of like that. Um, okay, so Richard Blanco was the fifth presidential inaugural poet of the United States of America, selected by President Barack Obama. And in 2023, Richard was awarded the National Humanities Medal by President Biden from the National Endowment for the Humanities. His most recent book, Homeland of My Body, has just been released and is available on the Books and Books website. The play that he co-wrote, Sweet Goats and Blueberry Senoritas, just opened at the Actors Playhouse in Miami. Correct?
Yep. Yep. Miracle Theater at Actors Playhouse just last night.
How, congratulations.
Thanks. Thanks. It was a beautiful opening. Those things also and it like goes by so quickly. You're like, oh my God, like what happened? I'm going again tonight and Sunday. So because we've invited different friends and family. I don't know if I'm going to get sick of watching my own play, but I've seen it already because it was produced in Portland, and you kind of don't like. It's interesting. It's new actors, and the director also has a new take, has some differences and sometimes a different take on certain scenes. So it's kind of interesting still to watch. We'll see.
Cool. When is it run through?
Through December 3rd.
Okay. Um, and the Miami Book Fair is coming up, and you are going to be there,
Yeah, yeah,
correct?
yeah.
I
Sunday. I'm sorry. Sunday at 3:50
No, go
with
ahead.
my mentor, who's now my colleague at FIU, Campbell McGrath, and he also has a new book out. So we'll be sharing some poems and sort of be like two old friends. Just maybe who knows where the conversation will go, but we have a lot of history and really a lot that I think the audiences will enjoy. That kind of, I don't want 30 years of sort of being literary literary colleagues and, like I said, mentor mentees as well.
Now I saw you on there 3 times, and one was an online event.
Um,
Are you remember? Is that true?
Maybe they haven't told me about it, but
Well, maybe you should go and look yourself up.
I'll check. Because as far as I know, I was no, and there'll be another thing at Books and Books on December 2nd, which is more of a book launch event. But I'll check. Thanks for that. I do need to check because I mean it's amazing how they pull off this book fair every year. So sometimes maybe something fell through the cracks, or maybe they're going to email me in a minute now. I don't know, but thanks. I'll check.
I love it. Okay, so I frequently forget to introduce myself because, my guests are so interesting and I want to dive right in. But my name is Yael Valencia Aldana, and I'm the author of the chapbook Aliens and the forthcoming poetry collection Black Mestiza, um, from University Press of Kentucky. That'll be coming out in 2025. I teach creative writing in South Florida, where I live with too many pets. Um, so now is where I said, Richard. Oh no, wait. Okay, this is gonna be a different one because Richard has a very deep voice. And I don't know if I told you the story, Richard, but we were at a gathering and you were doing karaoke, right? So I heard this noise and I was trying to figure out what the noise was. And it was sort of like a rumbling. And I'm like, is it a truck going by? It was just very odd noise. And it was you in some kind of range, some kind of singing range. Um, and I'm sure all the dogs in the neighborhood were like noticing, but it was just extraordinary. So what I'd like to do, Richard, is with your voice, if you could just stay very deep, very smooth. We're gonna do like an ASMR poetry podcast here. And my goal is for people to put this on repeat so that they're gonna fall asleep to this. And whenever they see you, for the three people listening to this podcast, go, you have to like go up to Richard and be very husky and whispery, and you go, "Hello, Richard Blanco." So you're naturally going to do that. I tend to get
Right.
higher, so I have to stay with you down here in ASMR land. So Richard Blanco, what is your poetry selection you brought for us?
I picked it's actually an uplifting poem, but it's called A Good Day to Die. And it's really just about those moments that we have prob perhaps not often enough of just where your day is just full of gratitude and just I mean it's not a happiness, it's just this feeling of being fulfilled, of being grateful and in some ways like just like I'm ready to go. Like I'm just like I feel like, completeness, right? Like it's not at all suicidal thoughts or anything like that, but just that feeling of like this life has been nice and if I were to die tomorrow kind of feeling, I'd be happy. So but it's also, as we'll see at the end, it's also a little more than that too, because but anyway, here we go. A good day to die. When there's nothing but a knowing, when you wake up to the stare of your dog's eyes like tiny brown suns shining with the truth of all you are before the alarm rings, when you lock your door, turn up the volume, and dance barefoot, swaying alone with your eyes closed, your robe open to the world, and all you lust for is a song to hold your body, when you beam a good morning at the post office or great to see you at the market, meaning every word cut by your lips like into little jewels that sparkle with the syllables of kindness. When you toss your to-do list in the garbage, waste yourself in the lazy beauty of being witness to the gesture of an oak, a squirrel's dramatic pause, to the frenzy at the bird feeder. When you sit under the clouds for dinner, filled with gratitude for more than bread, and say grace for dusk's feast of savoring hues and the dessert of sugary stars that indulge your soul. When you smile back at your smile, floating in the fog of the bathroom mirror, your faint yet fulfilled eyes return the gaze of God within you, pleased with the honest life you've given yourself. When all that's left is a knowing that you don't need to know yet another home in some new city for the love of something other than you, blanketed in the peace of your worn bed, ready to die with all you are or aren't, all you've given or gotten, all you've believed or doubted, all you've done or haven't done, ready to kiss the moon's cheek goodbye forever. But the moon says, no, not yet.
Wow, Richard, that was such a beautiful reading. You are a stunning reader.
Thank you.
Like just
Thanks.
freaking Okay, now you pull me out of ASMR land. I have to go back. I have I have moisture. I have moisture in my eyes.
Moisture,
Okay.
moisture.
I'm like, well, you say misty. I got misty, which is I do for certain readers, they can just get me. Um, what a beautiful, what a beautiful poem.
Thank you, thank
And
you.
for me, poetry is transformed when it's read into something else. There is such a power with the human voice, and us listening to it, and the rhythmicness of the poem. And of course, in there has to be the moon.
Right, of course. Yeah, yeah, it's true. I mean, when we read poems, they become songs, and they touch us, or received more in the way that music is received, because your voice is a musical instrument, and all the cadences and whatever pauses and rhythms, the page can't hold that, right? Like, it has to be the voice that brings that to the page. I also read my poems out loud while I'm working on them as well, because then I start feeling them in a deeper way. Uh, I always recommend to people, always read the poem out loud, because you're going to learn something different from reading it out loud. Um, and it just, and I would say, like, read. Sometimes people are like, but I should read it like the poem. Like, no, read it the way you feel it in your body, right? Like, when we sing along to a Beyonce song, it's not like we're not like we're trying to sound like Beyonce, right? We're just feeling that song, and we're just in it, right? So I over the years, I've come to realize that that's such a big part of the joy that I get of from poetry, not just writing it, but sharing it in verbally, and reciting it, basically. And it's really interesting because there's poems I've read a few. Maybe it's one that I've read most from the new collection, but it's really interesting. I don't know how to quite read them yet, a lot of the new ones, because you have to, and it also has to be live. In some ways, it has to be, you can't just read them in your room, right? Even sharing it with you, something else happens, and the poems are slowly teaching me how to read them. I say, they're like my brand new babies, and they can't talk yet. They're like, I'm waiting for them to tell me what they want me to do with the world, what they're going to grow up to be, and because my poems keep on teaching me even long after I write them.
So, who is this poet? I forgot. I didn't catch it. Who's the poet of this poem?
Me, I thought,
Yeah.
yes. I thought I was supposed to pick a poem by me, and you're supposed to pick a poem from me, and like we were going to talk about my poems.
Oh
Did I get
my
did I
God.
get this totally wrong? Well, it'll make for an interesting
I
episode. I am not that
can't.
self.
I can't. I cannot with this man. Okay. I'm
Well,
sorry.
it'll
I'm
be an
sorry.
interesting
You know
episode.
what? Okay. Okay. In Richard's defense, Richard is an extremely busy person. And if he had any sense at all, he would have said no to this because he probably doesn't have any time. And I was not going to ask him, but we were at a party. We were at a party. And my last guest, Elisa, walked up to him and says, "Do you know she has a podcast? You should be on it." You know, so she
I'm
kind of
sorry.
put him on the spot. I was not going to ask Richard because the book's launching and there's much happening.
All
But
right. Well, maybe,
here's
maybe,
pro
maybe,
tip.
maybe that's why I'm just like in book launching mode. I just totally like assumed it was about the book. So I'm sorry, but we could do
Okay.
another one another time. But might as well go with me, I guess. I don't know. Or no, you
Yeah.
pick it. You pick a
Yeah.
poem. You pick another poem by someone
No, I
else, and
want
then
to talk about this one. I want to talk about this one. So I thought it was by another poet, and I was like, "Oh, I'm surprised you did." Oh, I'm out of ASMR range. Richard, you really have to police me on this. You really have to. Um, okay, okay. Are you old enough to know what the term "play misty" for me means?
No, I don't think so. No. Play me. What is it?
Play Misty for me.
Oh,
It's an
no.
old Clint Eastwood movie,
Oh, really?
and he was a DJ, and this chick would call in every night. She'd be like, "Play Misty for me." So it was like a lot of radio announcer voice. Let me get my radio announcer voice going. This is good because we can talk about this. Um, so when you said about the moon, I thought, oh, of course Richard picked a poem with the moon in it because he always is with the
Yeah,
moon.
it's one of
And
my I like iconic, or I don't know if iconic is the right word, but one of my recurring Jungian images.
is the poem in stanzas or is it a column? Is it a
uh,
Blanco column?
four line stanzas, and then
Mm.
each stanza ends with when, and then it breaks. The line breaks across the stanzas. That's why I kind of read it like that. When. That's how I see it on the page, but I think it's also how I felt it in how I heard it. So I use the form that would support that in some ways, or not the form, but the way I stanziated it,
Stantiated it.
if that's a word.
Quatrains for those of us. It's tis a word. If volta's a word, quatrain's a word.
Yeah,
Um, so yeah, I thought, oh, I'm surprised he didn't pick Elizabeth Bishop. But this was so, honestly, it was so beautiful that it was hard for me to pay attention to what was being said. Because I was just sort of sinking into the rhythm of it, how it sounded, and it's I sort of floated away with the imagery and just the feeling of it.
mm-hmm.
And then halfway through, I thought, oh snap, I need to talk about things with this poem. Let me pay attention to things. Um, so a little bit unusual, but would you read it again?
Sure, sure, sure. A good day to die when there's nothing but a knowing. When you wake up to the stare of your dog's eyes, like tiny brown suns shining with the truth of all you are, before the alarm rings. When you lock your door, turn up the volume, and dance barefoot, swaying alone with your eyes closed, your robe open to the world, and all you lust for is a song to hold your body. When you beam a good morning at the post office, or great to see you at the market, meaning every word cut by your lips into little jewels that sparkle with syllables of kindness. When you toss your to-do list in the garbage, waste yourself in the lazy beauty of being witness to the gestures of an oak, or a squirrel's dramatic pause, or the frenzy at the bird feeder. When you sit under the clouds for dinner, filled with gratitude for more than bread, and say grace for dusk's feast of savory hues and the dessert of sugary stars that indulge your soul. When you smile back at your smile, floating in the fog of the bathroom mirror, your faint yet fulfilled eyes return the gaze of God within you, pleased with the honest life you've given yourself. When all that's left is knowing that you don't need to know yet another home in some new city for the love of something other than you, blanketed in the peace of your worn bed, ready to die with all you are or aren't, all you've given or gotten, all you've believed or doubted, all you've done or haven't done, ready to kiss the moon's cheek goodbye forever. But the moon says, no, not yet.
Thank you. I have to say that Well, the repeating of when. I love when a poet takes a plain word and turns it into something else by repeating it. And I tell my students a lot, when in doubt, repeat. It's your friend. Like just that when, when,
Right.
when turns it into something else. That I'll say what I really love about poetry is when it's just beyond your reach and you can't put your finger on that feeling, but it's divine. It's a beautiful feeling. And sometimes I'll get it from prose, like a section. But mostly I get it from poetry. And you have a stanza, and I don't know how it's arranged, but ready to die with all you are or aren't. And that it continues on. I couldn't write fast enough, but it's what some poets would call plain song, that the language is plain, but the way that it's put together, the rhythm of it, it's all that you are or aren't. And one of the amazing things that poetry can do is elevate the language we use every day in emails and laundry lists, grocery lists. Elevate that plain language into something else. And I love when I read a poem like that. And the way everything is constructed, you read it, and it makes that a flutter in your chest. And you just sit and you're like, my God, what happened here? And then you read it again, and it's just words, though. It's just words on the page. But what it's able to do to you, and it speaks to me. I've never, this is the first time I'm experienced this poem. And that stanza, like sometimes when we read poems and there's similes and metaphors going on, and you're like, yes, 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 I can see that technique. Ooh, maybe I can be that good. I can do it. And like I can tap into that. I can see all this technique going. But when the language is plain and the magic is there, it's really an extraordinary moment. That's really beautiful. And I have a little tear coming out of my eye.
Right.
One tear, just one, the cinematic one tear.
Right.
Um, so yeah, made me cry, Richard. It's just beautiful. And then you do have an amazing metaphor in here, which I was not fully able to catch. But in the poem where it's talking about saying good day, good morning, and meaning it fully. And then you have the metaphor is something like cuts your lips. Can you read that? Did you
Sure.
reread that section?
And you meaning every word cut by your lips into little jewels that sparkle with syllables of kindness.
Wow, that's beautiful and
Right.
so unusual. Like so just cutting your lips is it's sort of like a violent. So it's like my brain just starts to process cutting your lips, and then it turns into tiny jewels. Is it kindness?
Of sparkle with syllables of kindness. Yeah, tiny jewels that sparkle with
But
syllables of
then
kindness.
that wouldn't hurt your lips though, but it's cutting. So it's like it's a whole thing going on. Thank you so much for sharing this beautiful poem. Um, Do you recall where the poem's going to end up, where it's going to be published? I'm sure it's being published somewhere.
Oh, it's in the new collection, Homeland of My Body. Yeah.
No, Richard. Where it's like poetry magazine or the New Yorker or the Atlantic or
Um,
wherever.
no, I've never published this one. I'm actually not. I'm not really good about publishing like into single poems. I I don't know. I'm more of a book writer, so like I just like work kind of slowly, and so then I just pull everything together and put together a book, and then I'll send out some poems. So there's been a few that just maybe a few months before publication. Of course, I want a few poems out to sort of connect and promote the book or let people know about the book that's coming out. And then I was publishing maybe a handful here and there, like we did with West Trade. Um, but yeah, I've never been too good about that.
Well, you don't have to be, right?
Yeah.
You're like,
Well,
I'm Richard Blanco. I've got to do back.
and also every time I finish a book, I'm completely bone dry. Like because I put practically everything I have in the book, and so and then I have no unpublished work, which is really kind of a pain because like till I start sort of filling in, writing more poems. But like again, I'm a slow writer, and then it starts ramping up as I feel a book happening. Then I'll write more consistently and more often as I catching when I catch a sort of maybe a theme or I can start feeling what the book is going to do. I start writing more and more. Until it's time to really put the manuscript together. And well, you remember from taking the manuscript course together, how those processes work, right?
Yeah. A friend of mine sent because I love the ocean and ocean creatures. She sent me an image of a starfish swimming, and it's called a feather star. And I was like, feather star. And
Yes.
I made a note of it. I'm like, okay, we're gonna write a poem about that. I don't know what, but um, wow, that is just such a stunner, Richard. Thank you
Right.
so much. And when when did you start to write? Do you recall when you started this poem, this particular one?
This one's a bit older, and I think it was one of the poems that actually was kind of key in directing what this next book was going to be ending up about. I wasn't sure, but of course, we're never sure. And the poems start telling you what it is that you're going to sort of what your psyche is paying attention to, right? Or what your subconscious is needing to, what in your subconscious is needing to bubble up. And in part, it had to do a lot, not a lot, but partly the pandemic and partly uh, turning middle aged and really thinking about, that's a point in your life where you just reflect back on things. Or you're also like kind of like it's odd, right? Because you feel a greater sense of your mortality, and but the pandemic added to that, as we could literally have died. But also of just letting go of shit. Like we were like, no, I'm done here. So a lot of the poems are what I call little mortalities or little surrenderings. One of them is this idea, which is a line in this poem of like that insistence on home, which has always obsessed my writing, right? But that insistence that there's gonna this home, this paradise, I'm gonna be happily ever after, and I'm gonna move to Iceland or something, and that's kind of in a sense an egoic, that's part of our ego that wants that perfect thing that we're gonna be happy forever. There's another poem in there where I got hooked into thinking about the difference between happiness and joy, and how happiness is more egoic versus joy, which is by nature temporal, right? And it's those everyday moments that we can appreciate, and like, but happiness, we always want like that's a constant condition that want to be happy forever and ever, like, and I never want to be sad. But joy are those little moments. So anyway, um this is one of the earlier poems that started me slowly thinking about what this book was going to be about. I'm still sort of, like I said earlier, I'm still sort of learning still what it is. Like, I don't know. I just write this shit and then later I figure out like, or not, I shouldn't say that, I'm being flippant, but it is true that sometimes we are mystery to our own poems sometimes because they still have a lot to offer us as we ourselves become more familiar with them. And reading them is one of the ways that it starts opening up new pathways in you, and like you feel it in a different way. And so, so yeah, it was I would say it was one of the ones that set me off and like, okay, I'm gonna start writing a little more in this direction, poems in this direction.
Uh, Thank you for not understanding the brief and bringing that beautiful poem. Uh, that made me cry. I have not cried yet on this podcast. This is a first. So this is where the audio in the podcast went awry. I'm not sure what happened, but Richard's audio dropped out, but I decided to release part one because we've got the Miami Book Fair coming up this weekend, November, well, it's ongoing through November 19th. So I wanted to give a shout out to Richard's book. And if you're in Miami, you can go check him out and some of the wonderful events. I did not achieve my ASMR fantasy. I was too excited, so my voice was getting higher. Hopefully we will have a part two. Whether Richard has 20 minutes that he can spare here and there to finish this podcast, I don't know. Hopefully he does. Thank you so much for tuning in. And again, thank you so much to Richard for taking time out of his life, his very busy life, to spend with me for the podcast. So fingers crossed for part two.